Wasabi guys, welcome back to another Top 10 Commander video. This time we're going to be going over my picks for the 10 best cards from new Capenna Commander. To clarify, this is separate from the main set. I already did a top 10 for the Streets of New Capenna main set, so please go check out that video if that's what you're looking for. Overall, I would say this Commander product is pretty solid. You get a lot of value, especially in red. I don't know what it is over the past year, but we've been getting a lot of value in red, mostly because of the treasure token synergies. It's just so strong. It really complements the speed of the color pretty well. We've also been getting a lot of card advantage cards in white. That's been a trend that's been going on for a couple years, but I think the reason why I like this set so much is that you have commander options that, while they're very specific, it makes them fun to build around. It does kind of work against them, however. I think if you are ranking top 10 cards in general, you tend to avoid the most narrow cards, things that you're only going to be using for one deck, and that tends to be a commander option itself. So let's start it out here with number 10, Make an Example. This 4-mana black sorcery is nothing exceptional. I think 4 mana to deal with all of your opponent's boards in some roundabout way. That's essentially what this card is. Each opponent separates the creatures they control into 2 piles. For each opponent, you choose one of their piles, and they have to sacrifice the creatures in that chosen pile. This should help you deal with pretty much whatever you're having a problem with. Unless an opponent has more than one problem, then they're probably just going to put one in each pile. That being said, this affecting only your opponents, and usually in a commander game, you're going to have 3 opponents. I think that's still significant for only 4 mana. You'll see this as a problem with a lot of cards in this commander product. It's not that they're bad, it's that they're kind of poorly costed. So I think 4 mana or 3 mana, that's the sweet spot for black. Anything having to do with removal. Once it starts getting more expensive than that, it's really not worth it. But I really like this for sacrifice-focused strategies. So if you have a commander option that benefits off of sacrificing, you can get a lot of payoffs off of something like this. Number 9, we have Life Insurance. This is an example of a card that is kind of poorly costed, but it's still going to put in some work for the commander decks that are looking to play it, and a lot of aristocrat decks are going to want to play this. For 5 mana in white and black, you have an Extort enchantment, which is a very old keyword that I'm glad to see return. Whenever you cast a spell, you can pay either a white mana or a black mana. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain that much life. And I love that it has this ability, because whenever a non-token creature dies, you lose a life and create a treasure token. You heard that correctly. It triggers for whenever a non-token creature dies, not just yours. So you board wipe, you get a ton of treasure tokens, and you also have to lose a bunch of life. Extort is great though, because each time you extort it, you're probably going to be gaining back 3 life. So it's not uncommon to play some kind of aristocrat strategy with a life gain sub-theme, and this is what you would want to use it for, of course. That ability is just really strong, getting treasure tokens for killing your opponent's creatures, and that you have a way to replenish your own life total. If it didn't have the extort, I probably wouldn't consider it, but because it does, it will take away that pain. Number 8, we have In Too Deep. This is a big issue in blue. We've been looking for several ways to supplement our blue decks with any kind of effective removal. Doesn't have to literally remove the card, but in this case, if there's a problem, creature, planeswalker, you can deal with it by turning it into a clue. Great thing about this card is that it has split second, which means your opponents are probably not going to be able to do anything about it unless they're sacrificing a creature to an Ashnod's Altar, because that is a mana ability. The split second does tend to appear in some commander products more often than main sets. You could probably understand why. That's just really powerful. That's really what it has going for it. If it didn't have split second, it's kind of like with Life Insurance. If it didn't have Extort, I probably wouldn't consider it. It's still going to suffer from the fact that blue doesn't tend to deal with enchantments or artifacts. It doesn't really tend to deal with non-creature permanents that well. So having creature and planeswalker at least, I think, is going to make it worth it for some decks. And because it's also an aura, you're going to have aura synergies, enchantment synergies. And for only 2 mana, this is the sweet spot for removal or any kind of problem-solving card. Anything more than that, and it becomes less convenient. Number 7, we have Smuggler's Share. We're getting a lot of cards like these in white, especially in commander products. I don't know what it is, but Wizards is paying attention to the huge deficiency in white, and that is being able to keep up with your opponents. You'll also notice that when white offers you card advantage or ramp, treasure tokens, it's usually to catch up to your opponents, not just to tap for mana or to straight up draw cards. We go back to the card balance. It's quite literally what white is about. It's about balancing. But for what this 3 mana white enchantment does, I think it is is actually pretty solid because you're not dependent on your opponents necessarily having more cards than you do or owning more lands than you do, but if they go off and draw 3 cards a turn, you'll be able to draw a card yourself at that end step. And if they go off, they get 3 lands coming into play, you'll get a treasure token. So this happening for each opponent on any turn, I think makes a big difference here. White needs to be more competitive when it comes to card advantage, any type of treasure token, mana advantage. I think Smuggler's Share is actually going to help out a lot in Commander. And then number 6, we have Extravagant Replication. Here's another highly costed enchantment that I think is still going to be worth it. For 6 mana at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a token that's a copy of another target non-land permanent you control. We have a lot of token synergies. We have a lot of cards that will fool around with creature tokens by either populating or getting more of the same exact creature token. But with this card, we can pretty much take advantage of any strong non-token permanent we have. We don't have to. Again, like we can still use this ability to create a token that's a copy of another token we have because it's still a target non-land permanent. It is 6 mana. It is going to be in that territory where because you have to wait for the beginning of your upkeep, some people won't want to play it. And it's not going to fit in every deck. But if your deck is a creature token deck and you're not so much focused on numbers, there are different trains of thought when it comes to creature tokens. You either want a lot of creature tokens for combat or you want powerful creature tokens because of their abilities. I think this is definitely better for the latter. And then number 5, we have Reign of Riches. We get to talk about the continuing reign of the treasure token strategy and how Prosper Tomebound just seems to be everyone's favorite child. For 5 mana, this red enchantment I think is actually fairly costed. When it enters, you create 2 treasure tokens. That's a big reason why, getting immediate mana. The first spell you cast each turn, that mana from a treasure was spent to cast has Cascade. So this is very similar to another red card that we actually got in the pre-con deck for Prosper, where you also get Cascade off your first spell. Cascade is also great because you are casting those spells from exile. So you get the treasure synergy, you get the play from exile synergy. Because it does offer you those 2 treasure tokens, it's not that narrow to where it would only really be good in a Prosper Tomebound deck. If you have a Cascade deck, this is still going to be really fun. It's going to be more of the same, which is exactly what you want in those types of strategies. Number 4, we have the first commander option here, and I think probably the best commander option. I was just looking over, and I had to figure out which one is really worth talking about more than the others. And for me, that is Tivit, Seller of Secrets. The 6 mana Esper-colored Sphinx Rogue is 6/6 with flying and ward 3, because this is a voting commander. While voting, you may vote in additional time. This is what people have been asking for a while. Some type of synergy with cards from the conspiracy sets. There are a lot of cards from Commander products because it's a multiplayer format. You have a lot of cards that allow players to vote for a certain ability. And we were always waiting for a legendary creature that specifically synergized with the act of voting, and Tivit is that one. Council's Dilemma this time is a great trigger on ETB and combat damage. Starting with you, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, investigate. For each bribery vote, you create a treasure token. So you either get card draw or ways of drawing cards, and you get treasure tokens for mana. Both I think are great. It is a 6 mana commander, but you do have ward 3, so there's a bit of protection there. Voting and pretty much deciding what you get out of your cards is why this commander is so appealing to me. And a lot of the commander options, I've already said it at the beginning of the video, they're very specific in what they do. I think that makes them very easy to build around, which also makes them fun to build around. This is a good example because there's really no mystery to what you're going to be including here. Why I put it on here, why it's one of the only ones on here, is because it will introduce a brand new strategy. We've had commander decks, no doubt, that have included a lot of the Council Dilemma cards, a lot of the voting cards, but we've never had one where the commander option directly synergized with them. Number 3, we have Benny Brack's Zoologist. Talking about white cards before with Smuggler's Share, you get another great white card for commander decks if you're looking for more card draw. White decks don't have a problem with creating tokens, and at the beginning of each end step, if you created a token this turn, you get to draw a card. Also pay attention to that trigger when it says at the beginning of each end step. Just like with Smuggler's Share, you get the benefit off of your opponent's turns. And it's not that difficult to create tokens on your opponent's turns. We have cards like Smothering Tithe to do that. And each time you get a treasure token off of a Smothering Tithe, at the beginning of that next end step, you're going to be drawing a card. I don't think this is going to be groundbreaking for white, but it is more of the same for white that we've seen over the past couple years. Easier and easier ways of drawing cards in the color. for the longest time, you go back 10 years, you were really disadvantaged when building around mono white because you had maybe land tax, and then you had a bunch of artifact ramp to kind of help you get to your commander. But now you get a lot more. You get a lot of card draw, you get some treasure token support. We're almost at the point where I don't think if you decided to go to this specific color and play monocolor, that you're going to be at a significant disadvantage. You'll also notice that this is a legendary creature, so you can build a commander deck specifically around Benny Brax, so that you know you're going to have to synergize with creature tokens so that you'll get that easy card draw. And I don't really think this would be a bad commander option, just maybe not the most interesting one. And when you think about it, for 4 mana, it's not that far off from why Prosper Tomebound is a good commander. Getting through your deck quicker, getting to play more spells, it is a good building block for a commander deck. And then number 2, we have Rose Room Treasurer. Here we have yet another great red card, and they just all seem to do something with treasure tokens that is incredibly appealing. And this time we have the newer ability, the newer trigger in Alliance, where whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you get an ability. This time you create a treasure token if this is the first or second time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's after that, then you get to pay X. When you do, it deals that much damage to any target. So you have basically a Lotus Cobra in red, but it's even better because it's not just floating mana, it's treasure tokens. Red has a lot of payoffs now where if you do something, you get a treasure token. I think this is even easier to get that payoff. And what's great is that there's extra value here once you get a ton of treasure tokens. What do you want to do? You want to spend them on something. So if you're at the point in the late game where you just have nothing but a bunch of mana, you can dump it all into X and burn a player. It's a simple card for what it does, but I have no doubt believing that this is going to be a staple for a lot of red decks. It's also like with Reign of Riches, it's not so specific to treasure token strategies that you couldn't play it in other strategies. You could easily throw this into a warrior deck if you want to get extra mana, keep your turn going. You could also copy it, find ways of getting more Rose Room Treasurer so that you get more of their triggers. In fact, I think this would be a great candidate for Rite of Replication. So there's a lot to like here. Anytime you get mana just for playing creatures and being able to hold on to that mana because it's in the form of a treasure token, I think it's wonderful. So before we go to number 1, let's talk about some honorable mentions, and I don't have too many. I could just talk about some of the main commander options, and while I think they will make good commander options, there wasn't really anything that they did that grabbed my attention quite like with Tivette. And we have Anhelo the Painter. I've talked about this one. It has the potential to be very competitive, sacrificing creatures to copy spells, combining Aristocrat and Spellslinger. It could be pretty powerful. Henzi Toolbox Tori was more of the same, taking advantage of larger creatures, sacrificing them, also getting a payoff. But likewise, nothing really screamed, you gotta play this, you gotta experiment with something new. I will say that a commander option that was like that, the Beamtown Bullies. This is a commander option where you're going to want to give your opponents pretty awful creatures that hurt them when they gain control of them. It's not a very practical strategy. In fact, I think it's going to be quickly hated out in most play groups, but this card definitely does get some points for effort. So number 1, we have Body Count, a 3-mana black instant with a spectacle cost of 1, so you get to cast it for its spectacle cost if an opponent lost life this turn. You draw a card for each creature that died under your control this turn. Because it's so cheap starting out at 3 mana, you don't even really have to force an opponent to lose life, but if they do, it's a pretty impressive 1 mana to potentially draw a ton of cards off of your board. Now keep in mind, there are a ton of commander options where you are encouraged to do nothing but just sacrifice your own board, like with Sheree, Shizo's Caretaker, so you don't have to wait for a board wipe. It's just a great way to recover late game. So if there is a Wrath of God, anything that just dealt with your whole board, this should probably push you way ahead of your opponents who also had to deal with the same board wipe. So it's great defensively, it's also great if you're looking to go off in a turn. It's very easy to get the spectacle cost, so you are paying a trivial amount of mana to fill your hand up and then some. So that's going to do it for the video. Overall, I think we've been getting more of the same with the exception of Tivette Seller of Secrets. I really do feel like the majority of what this commander product is offering you is consistency in colors where consistency is needed. So you get tremendous card draw in black this time around at instant speed. You get great mana production and card draw from red and white. Blue gets a little bit of something with removal and token copying. Overall, I'm pretty impressed. I think it was a solid set. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. As always, subscribe if you have not. Commander Void here. I will see you all next time.